Welcome to WP Coffee Talk. Thank you to our sponsor, Helix Managed WordPress Hosting, for both their sponsorship and hosting our site, WPCoffeeTalk.com. Now on to our episode. Well, welcome to WP Coffee Talk. And we're here for I think this is our 8th show. So I've been around for 2 months already, hard to believe. And today I'm joined by Keanan Koppenhaver. And Keanan, you're in the Chicago area, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up out in the suburbs and I've lived in the city here for about 5 years now.
So I'm in Rochester, New York. We know what bad weather feels like. Because I'm a mile off of Lake Ontario.
Yep.
You get the bad weather, and then I get it about a day later. So,
yeah,
I'm expecting
we've just gotten our first week of sun here of the spring this year, so it's coming your way.
Us too. It's like it almost hit 70, and I was like in my glory today. But
yep.
I'm expecting from now on you're going to give me a heads up on what weather I should expect coming forward. So you are in the WordPress environment, the WordPress community. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself. Tell us about your business.
Yeah. So like you said, my name's Keanan. I run with my business partner a company called Alpha Particle. We're a digital consultancy that helps businesses small and large manage and execute their digital projects. So because of my background in WordPress, a lot of our work is in the WordPress space. We also do other things, other kinds of technologies and things like that. But we do a lot of our work is WordPress. And just because, the platform is great and it helps people get started easily, and a lot of people are already running it. So that's kind of where we chose to start our business.
Now, when you say a lot of people are already running it, I'm hoping you're not just inheriting projects, because one of my biggest headaches ever is I already have a site. Can you just take it over?
Sure. And honestly, I mean, that is a lot of the work that we do. I'm very much comfortable with writing code, and that's like my entire job pretty much. And so I have a lot of experience with inheriting kind of sites that are a mess and cleaning them up and enforcing best practices and stuff like that. So that is a lot of the work that we do. And it can be a struggle at times, but it's also pretty rewarding to be able to take something that's like, it's working, but not well, and turn it into something like, yeah, this works how it's supposed to. And the admins are happy with what they have to put into the fields in the back, and kind of sorting all that stuff out and untangling it. So we do a lot of that, but we enjoy it as well.
So if a woman hands you a necklace and it's all in knots, you're good at untying that too, I'm guessing?
That's a slightly different skill set, I think, but it's something I should definitely maybe work on and see if my skills can cross over at all.
There you go. So if I've ever heard a plea for comment your code, comment your code, comment your code, it's anybody who's ever inherited spaghetti
yeah,
code.
It's very helpful. I do a lot of like, all right, so this code is calling this other piece and it's relying on this plugin. And it's a lot of like forensic work almost to try and figure out how all the pieces fit together, especially right when we're kicking off a project.
You sure do need to have that like Sherlock Holmes mentality sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
So I always ask everybody here to show me your mug. So let's see what mug you got today.
Indeed. So today I have my cat dad mug.
I love it.
We adopted a cat from a shelter almost 4 years ago now, I think. And his name is Meowin' Brando. That was his name at the shelter, and just decided.
Oh, it's a cute one.
Yeah. So yeah, he's at home, but brought in the cat dad mug today, and I'm not drinking coffee because it is 4 p.m. here in Chicago. So I'm drinking ginger ale at the moment. So that's what I'm.
You can drink ginger ale out of a mug. That works. You could drink anything out of a mug, but I think I tell people, they're like, what if I don't? Somebody asked me from, actually, I do think it was over in Europe somewhere. I can't remember who it was.
Mm-hmm.
If they said, I don't drink coffee, can I still be on your show? I go, I don't care if you put bourbon in your mug, just have something in there.
Yeah. Maybe we'll wait till we're off the air for that, but yeah, it might be a good option as well.
It is Friday, so maybe Friday night you can tip one back later and be like, hey, I was on a podcast. I don't have any mugs with me today, so I grabbed my water bottle. So even though this is WP Coffee Talk, I have my water bottle today. This is the bottle that was a speaker gift last year from WordCamp Montreal on their 10th anniversary. And because it's a water bottle, I actually have water in it. So
that's a cool bottle. I like that a lot. It's
nice. It keeps things cold for really,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm really happy with it. Fantastic. So tell us, how did you get involved with WordPress? So everybody has a great origin story. What's yours?
So my origin story was I was in college still, and I had messed around with building websites. I kind of was doing it on my own, so just kind of piecing tutorials together. Didn't really know what I was doing, but I saw a posting for an internship at an agency here in Chicago, 3 or 4 months over the summer, and they said they wanted to bring somebody on. And so I applied, and they, moved forward with that. And when I got in there, I realized that a lot of the work they were doing was WordPress, which is something I had never really done before, but there's plenty of tutorials and stuff online. So I kind of just started digging into it. And the nice thing was there were so many developers at the same company who were much more, advanced than me. And so if I had questions or like that really helped kind of speed up my learning process and getting into it, because I could bring specific questions to them. And, asking someone in person is always better than using Stack Overflow or whatever, especially if that's their job, because they know, usually know where to look or, what to look for and stuff like that. So that's, pretty much how I got started, just building sites at the agency and working with clients and figuring out, what projects WordPress was good for and what things, would better be suited to something else. And just kind of leveling up that way. So been doing that pretty much ever since. I've had every job I've had up to now has worked with WordPress in some capacity. So that was basically it. I never looked back from that point. But like I said before, we've expanded a little bit and do stuff outside of WordPress, but still a lot of our work is WordPress because there's, so much out there and so many people that need help.
Yeah. No, I talked to Allie Nimmons a while back, and she was almost apologetic for the fact that she uses themes. And I said, why are you apologetic? That's what they're there for.
Yeah,
Are you
absolutely.
putting your own themes, or are you using themes, or a little bit of both, some hybrids?
So, yeah, I mean, when we get a project from scratch, it's usually because, the client has a design that they want to implement. So a lot of that is from scratch. Like we hinted at before, a lot of the work that we do is kind of picking up the pieces of stuff that's been done custom. So that's about a 50-50 mix between somebody who had somebody build a custom theme or just had somebody use a page builder. So untangling all the stuff that, goes into page builders and stuff like that. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of the work we do is custom themes and plugins, just because that's what we're good at. And if you want to just pull a theme off the shelf and use that, like we either, help you do that yourself, or we have people who we know who that's what they do. They're not so much into writing the code and all that, but they're much better suited to that sort of stuff. So we try to only step in where we're useful. And that's, with a lot of the more custom stuff.
And isn't that the beautiful thing about WordPress, though, is that all of us can make a living doing so many different things.
Absolutely.
And the end product is hopefully a beautiful site that is usable and has a good public interface for whoever the customer is for that client. So
yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. No, that's a fun thing. So that's how you got started with WordPress. That's awesome. I love WordPress. What's your favorite thing about WordPress?
My favorite thing, I think, is that there are so many people out there who already know how to use it and who get a ton of value out of using it. So whether they use it in their business or whether they're, journalists who are writing on it or things like that, like it's in a place right now, being, I think, 16 years old this year, that, that it's like, it's a very well-developed platform and it's very familiar to a lot of people. If you've, ever tried to build your own website at any point in your career, like odds are you've tested WordPress at least. So I love how it kind of helps people who are both on the administration side or writers or developers to kind of all speak a common language around, here's how we want to, build this product. And that makes it a lot easier to get something that works really well for all of those groups of people.
Absolutely. Do you manage your client sites then afterwards, or do you kind of build them and send them on their way?
So it depends. Again, like, a lot of the projects that we take on are, the client already has kind of internal developers or people who are working in their organization to maintain the site. And so they'll, in a lot of cases, have already even, have it hosted somewhere. So we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's more just like we can come in and fix their specific problem or untangle some stuff for them. But then, we usually just kind of give it back and step back. We don't want to work on stuff longer than we're needed just for the sake of, getting more, revenue and stuff like that. We love solving specific problems for clients and being able to kind of step back and say like, all right, you got this now. Like you're good.
That's great. So it's not like you're not in the hosting business. You're not in the maintenance business.
No. I mean, we, because I'm a dev and I like to geek out about things, like we run our own staging server and I manage all of that ourselves. So like stuff that before it's ready for launch, like we host our client sites up to that point. And we run that, but we're not in the business of, hosting. There's plenty of awesome companies that do that we're happy to refer people to.
Yeah, they sure are, for sure. So, what's something, okay, so I've seen thousands of websites in my job. I've built hundreds of websites, some of them good, some of them, let's hope they don't show up on archive.org. Let's just say that.
Sure.
What do you think is something that people sometimes skip over or don't pay enough attention to when it comes to building their websites that would either, make a good website better or help them in some other way?
So the biggest thing for me personally with that is, like I said, we see a lot of stuff that's kind of fixer-upper sort of work. And a lot of times what we get is a client will come in, they'll say, hey, like, my website's really, really slow. What's going on? And like, they're not doing anything crazy that should make it be that slow. So when we start to look into it, we realize that they're loading, a bunch of JavaScript and CSS and all this other stuff that they're not really even using, but because they have plugins still activated that they don't need, that they were trying out once and didn't deactivate or things like that. There's just a lot of stuff that's loading in the background that's really slowing things down. And, stuff like if you have a plugin that's doing like, it's like a forum kind of thing. And there's like a feature where you can like rank posts or like upvote or downvote them. Like we found a case where that was a really slow database query. But they had like unchecked that box. And so they weren't even using that feature. So, stuff like that, where it's just like leaving stuff activated that's not even in use, and kind of just site owners a lot of times would benefit from just a really basic but regular audit of like, okay, are we still using all these plugins that we install when we launch the site? Do we still need all this functionality? Because everything has a cost in terms of page load time. So that's probably the biggest thing that we see is just slow sites that could be faster just by turning off plugins.
I logged into a site just last week that had been launched for a couple of years. I was helping somebody out, and they still had the coming soon plugin.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's that sort of thing where it's like one thing at a time. You say, oh, it's just one plugin. It's not that big a deal. But over time, it builds up. And especially if you have multiple people who are administering the site, someone will install a plugin over here, and then somebody else will install a different one over here, and they'll either conflict or they're just both be features that eventually you don't need anymore. So just kind of checking in on it regularly to see, all right, are we still using all this stuff that we've built up over the years is pretty important.
Well, you like this one too. I was helping a customer the other day with their website, and she logged in and she had Elementor, Beaver Builder, and one other one, I can't remember what it was,
Yep.
and a Gutenberg site, right? So it was also had Gutenberg in it. And I said, which one are you using? And she's like, I don't know. So we have to kind of dig all through that and figure out, how to even edit the page. So
yeah.
And I think that's really
on a staging site where you're like trying out page builders to see which one you want, like that's totally great. Like that's awesome because you can just toggle them on and off and you can see the features of different ones. But yeah, in production, that's definitely not something you want because especially page
builders, they're all live.
Yeah, they really load a lot of stuff just to do what they do.
Exactly. No, that's really, really good advice. When you think back on your career with WordPress specifically, what do you wish that you knew then that you know now? So something that you've learned over the years that would have made life easier.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing for me is WordPress has expanded since its inception and to be a really useful platform for doing a lot more than just blogging. That we hear that all the time. It's more than just a blogging platform, all that sort of stuff. But there are, a few specific use cases that we've found that we tried to force WordPress to do a job that it wasn't really equipped to do. And so I think the biggest thing for me, this is not just applicable to WordPress, but to everything, is use the tools for the jobs that they're good for. So if I think back to some of the projects that were like the biggest struggles, is because we had this idea and the client was already pretty sold on WordPress. And so we wanted to do that. Or sold on some other tool when WordPress would have been a better choice. And so kind of stepping up at the beginning of the project and saying, hey, we need to figure out what the right tool for the job is. And it may not be WordPress or maybe WordPress, and you're thinking about using something else. And so I think that's an important skill to learn, but it's hard to see that far into the future when you haven't been burned a few times before.
That's true.
But that's again goes back to having kind of a network of people you can reach out to and say like, hey, have you ever built a site like this? And how did you do it? Did you use X or did you use Y? And do you regret that decision now that you've seen it live or not?
No, those are really good points. Absolutely. And getting those, that feedback from people who've been there, done that is also always a thing. The other thing that you touched on a little bit, and then what your comment just now made me think of too, is every customer is not your customer.
For sure.
So can you talk a little bit about how you qualify who is a good customer for Alpha Particle?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it's a little bit more open for us now because we don't do exclusively WordPress. But back at the agency when we did do WordPress, it was the customer would come in and we'd have to evaluate it with a couple of developers. And we brought a designer into this discussion frequently too. And it's, is this a problem that we can kind of already see the solution for, or at least the path forward, right? So for me, like if we get somebody that comes in and says, all right, I want to build this thing, and I want to build, this crazy interactive mobile app. Um, the most of a mobile app that I've built was like a to-do list demo that I was just trying out a new language, right? So that's not a great fit for us because we don't necessarily have those capabilities. And we could just say yes and try to figure it out and like try to stretch, but that wouldn't be a good result for our clients. So we try to balance, like, is this work that we can do, that we've done at least pieces of it before and we can kind of see the way forward, or if we said yes to this, we would be stepping into just a jungle of unknown. So that's kind of how we do it. And on the tech side, at least on the business side, we try to see if there's workflow things or business processes that we can help with too. In a lot of cases, we combine that with the technology, and that's where we're the most effective. But yeah, a general rule for me is, like, if I don't even see how to get started, or if there are multiple big problems that are already defined that I don't think I can have at least an idea of how to solve, it's probably something that we should pass on or figure out who in our network we can pass it off to.
Mm-hmm. When I was first starting out with WordPress as a freelancer, I would take almost any job that came my way. And if somebody said they didn't have money, I would cut my prices. I'd do anything because I thought that was important to just have the customers. I've since then, learned that, one website that pays you $5,000 is a lot easier to deal with than 5 websites that pay you $1,000 each.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
of the amount of work. So that's something I always try to teach other people kind of going forward too. And that's all part of that, qualifying the client and making sure that the right client for you.
Yeah, well, and the biggest thing with that too, like you kind of touched on, is like it's also much easier for you to manage working on one website rather than working on 5. And so if you say yes to everything, you might think that you're helping your client out because they're going to be able to get your work out of the deal. But in a lot of times, if you're stretching yourself too thin or taking on work that you're not suited to do, and it's going to take you a lot longer than someone who is more skilled in that specific thing, you're actually kind of doing a disservice to your client rather than helping them, and that's not what you want, for sure.
Yeah. And like you said, especially if you can refer them to somebody who specializes in that area, then everybody's much happier at the end of the day. So for sure.
Absolutely.
So you're part of your local WordPress community, is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
So we have a meetup here on the north side of the city, up by Wrigley Field, if you know where that is. That's pretty active. We get about, I'd say, 40 to 50 people a month up there.
That's great.
Yeah, and so yeah, I started. My excuse was I moved to a new apartment 3 years ago or so, and this meetup was 2 blocks down the street, and so I said, like, all right, I really don't have an excuse not to go. But I've been going pretty much every month for 3 years or so, and gotten to know a lot of the people there and the organizers and all that stuff too. And so it's a pretty active community, and it's great because people come in, and they introduce themselves as like, hi, I own this business, and I know my site's WordPress, but I don't really know how to update it, or like I want to make do a new plugin. I don't really know how those work. And the community is awesome. There's people who, like we were talking about before, people who just, install plugins, install themes, and work with those and kind of help people administer the site, all the way up to people who do everything custom from scratch. So that community is really good, in particular about matching people to the people in the meetup with the appropriate skill level when they come in with kind of stuff like that. So it's been really cool to be a part of that community and watch it grow and be able to help so many people.
That's awesome. Now, I talk to a lot of freelancers, of course, and people working out of their kitchens, dining room tables, some sitting with their legs crossed on their bed, in the coffee shops, things like that. Now, you mentioned earlier to me when we were talking before the show, that you are in a co-working space.
Yeah. So we're in a space here in Chicago called 1871. It originally launched as a startup incubator, so it was mostly for venture capital funded startups who wanted to come and get mentorship and talk to more venture capitalists and have some space and some money to get their company going. But in recent years, they've kind of opened it up just to more general co-working. So about 2 months ago, we got an office here, and you can see most of it actually on the screen right now. It's not super huge, but it's got enough for 2 desks for me and Jay, my business partner. But yeah, so it's been great because just like, the meetup in the WordPress community, there's a community here of people who, startups who need, technology consulting, or existing businesses who have stuff that they're kind of running, or even other developers and designers who we can work with or pass off work to if it's not a good fit, like we talked about earlier. And it's also nice, just, like you kind of alluded to get out of the house and, take the train for 20 minutes and come down into the office and be here for the day and kind of have that change of scenery. So it's been great for us.
And yet, if you get snowed in and there's 4 feet of snow, you can still work from home.
Absolutely. Yep. It's nice to have both options. And the cat especially loves when I take days off and work from home. So that's a win for both of us in that regard.
I saw a meme recently. You're mentioning cats, so that made me think of it, where they had a keyboard
Yeah.
and like an old keyboard from, the days of desktops and everything. And then
Yep.
they had their laptop and it was what they called the decoy keyboard because the cat
Oh,
was laying
yeah. I
like
should invest in one of those. That would really help me. He sent a lot of like Slack messages and emails because he just walked across and hit enter. So maybe you need to invest in one of those. I'll have to look that up.
you could probably get them dirt cheap.
Yep, I would think so at this point. Yeah.
And while you're at it, get him his own mouse.
There you go. Nice.
He is a
Whole
cat.
workstation for him. Yep.
Exactly. So we were talking also before the show that you've been involved in WordCamps as well. So
Mhm.
I am a huge person for WordCamps. I think I've attended something like 31, 32 camps and spoken at like 25 of them. So
Wow.
I love sharing information at WordCamps and meeting people. So tell us a little bit about your WordCamp experience. And if you can think of one or two, what I call like the mountaintop experiences, like where there was this huge revelation or you met your idol or, that kind of thing, what was really a moving experience for you?
Sure. So I got started at WordCamps because back when I was working for that agency, we wanted to get a little bit more involved in the community, and we felt like we were doing awesome work, and we had a lot of really talented people in our company, but we weren't sharing that at all. And that's kind of one of the core tenets of WordPress in a lot of ways. So developers as a whole are not usually super like let's get out and give speeches and give talks and like talk to people and shake hands and do all that. But that is a huge part of like what I enjoy doing. So I kind of raised my hand and said, yeah, I'll figure out what this whole WordCamp situation is and go around. So my first one that I went to was WordCamp Chicago here in the city. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I saw a lot of the talks and I saw ones that I really enjoyed, like others that I thought could be better. And I was like, all right, well, I can do this. This is fine. So I applied to speak at WordCamp Nashville, and got accepted. It was for just like a 15-minute lightning talk. It was how to put a custom field in your admin using advanced custom fields and how to show it in the template. Like that was it. It was very, very straightforward, very simple. And it was like super nerve-wracking, even though it was only 15 minutes. Especially because once I got there, my talk was right after Nathan Ingram's talk, which was fantastic and like had the audience super like revved up. And I was like, okay, that's going to be really hard to follow.
Nathan's a nice guy.
Yeah, he is. And so, since then I've spoken at a bunch of different camps all across the country. As far as a mountaintop moment for me, it was, going to all these different regional ones. That same year that I did Nashville, I was also in Cincinnati and Dallas, as well as the one in Chicago. And that was also the same year that I went to my first WordCamp US in Philadelphia. And so that was really cool because at each of these WordCamps, like I felt like I was I was usually the one or two like out of town person, everyone else was pretty local. So I felt like I was kind of like inserting myself into this group of people that like already knew each other. And it was always like a little weird. But at US, it was cool because like there were so many people that I had met at the regional WordCamps that were there. And it's like, oh yeah, we already like, we chatted at this, and I knew a lot of people there. And I also got to meet a lot of people who, you'd see like their Twitter profile picture or their profile on GitHub. And you're like, oh, like this is the person who writes all the code for this. And I was able to like sit with them and work on something that they've worked on or built, which was really, really cool. So that's why I really recommend kind of some of the bigger ones that, if you're in Europe, going to WordCamp EU. If you're in the US, obviously WordCamp US. We're very lucky this year because it's in St. Louis. So it's going to be a real short train ride for me to get down there.
Nice.
But just because like that's such a bigger gathering and that like you're so easily able to make connections and meet a lot of people that you've either just read about online or just heard about, or even people just from other experiences in WordPress.
Yeah, I've met a lot of my WordPress heroes.
Yeah, it's always really interesting because they're always more like down to earth and like more chill than you would expect. It's like, oh, like you worked on this, like you've worked on WordPress for 5 years and like built this entire huge thing, but you're also just like an awesome person to hang out with. Like that's a pretty cool experience.
Sometimes I have to keep my inner fangirl like, chill, girl,
yeah,
chill.
I know. I feel you. That's always tough, but it's
At WordCamp US 2016. Yeah, 2016. So that was the second one in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting at lunch with a bunch of people. There was one empty seat at our table. And I looked up and a guy was walking toward the table and he gestured. He's like, can I sit there? And I'm like, It was Matt Mullenweg.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
And almost nobody at the table had any clue who he was, but I was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to ask you questions, dude, because you sat at my table. So,
Yeah, that's
so I was
cool.
like, keep it calm, Michelle, keep it calm. Yeah, but definitely it's really cool because you realize everybody's just a person.
Yeah.
So they might write excellent code. They might, be somebody who's like just a superstar in the community, and yet, they put their pants on one foot at a time too. Just like the rest.
Yep.
That's awesome. Are you ready for my rapid fire questions?
I am. Let's do it. I've been like doing my stretches today, so I'm ready to go. Let's get it. Let's get it going.
Let's do a little stretch.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, so what are 2 to 4 of your must-have plugins when you're working with a site?
Sure. So like I said, I do a lot more site development than I do kind of management. So the ones that I like they help me write code better and faster and just kind of get a site working much quicker. So we already talked a little bit about advanced custom fields and how that's, really useful for customizing the admin. It has kind of a twin, I guess, in a plugin called Field Manager. And the difference there is that you define all your fields in code instead of clicking buttons in the admin. So for me, and for people who know how to write code, that's sometimes a little bit quicker. And then the other one that I really like is a plugin called Query Monitor. It's like a kind of a catch-all debugging plugin that you install, and it lives up in that little admin bar on the top of your site when you're logged in. And it says, hey, you've got this database call that's taking way too long, or you've got some PHP errors in your code that you really should look into. And stuff like that. So especially like we talked about the work that we do where we're kind of untangling something that's already built, that's really helpful to kind of see where we should focus our effort first. And just in general, that's usually my first, when I get a call from somebody who says, oh, my site's not working, I say, hey, like, let's install Query Monitor. Let's see what's going on. Sometimes like if, you're writing a plugin that should only do something on the homepage and it's doing it on other pages, like Query Monitor will say like, oh yeah, for some reason, WordPress thinks this page is the homepage. So like look into that. And it's really helpful to kind of untangle some of the black box pieces of WordPress that are traditionally more hidden away for people. So those are the ones I use all the time, and those are probably my two kind of go-to. If I only had to use a couple plugins on a site, those are the ones I put on there.
So far nobody said hello, Dolly. I just don't understand.
Everyone takes it for granted because it's pre-installed, but I mean, it's great from a perspective of learning. I gave a talk a couple months ago about how to just put together a really simple WordPress plugin, like build your first WordPress plugin. And that was the first one we looked at because we said, okay, here's probably about the simplest one you could build. What are all the pieces of this that we could use in our own plugin? So it's great for what it is. I just don't think a lot of people use it on their sites day to day.
No, it actually doesn't do much. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
But it also doesn't really slow down much either.
Yeah, that's true.
What is one of the biggest WordPress mistakes you've ever made, and how did you learn from it?
So the biggest WordPress mistakes for me was, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think just using WordPress for something that it wasn't really good for, and then not seeing that as we were kind of getting more and more into the weeds. So the project, we picked WordPress, and it was also going to be kind of a flashy front end with like a bunch of more like a web app really than a website itself. And this was before the REST API and all that sort of stuff came out. So we were trying to like hand roll a bunch of this stuff. And it just kind of ballooned out of control to the point where I was like, all right, this should have been something much more custom and not trying to bend WordPress into this weird shape. And so, like I said, just kind of looking at that beforehand and just always making sure that to the best of your knowledge that you're using the right tool for the job.
And when you say that, I have taught WordPress to local communities here in Rochester. And one of the people in one of the classes asked me and said, we really want to build something like Airbnb. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm not sure that WordPress is the right vehicle for Airbnb. They said, well, there must be a plugin that'll do all that. And I said, I don't know that there's a plugin that will do all that.
Well, maybe not one, but you could absolutely stitch together 10 plugins and build, Airbnb on WordPress, right? But
not somebody in a WordPress 101 class.
Right. Well, right. That's true too. That's a much bigger time investment than probably someone who's just getting started with it would be able to put in.
So it is interesting how everybody thinks that it should just be able to do everything.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Like you said, when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
What's your proudest WordPress moment?
My proudest WordPress moment, I think, was probably I was able to, after kind of doing all this speaking and all that stuff kind of at different WordCamps, I was able to last year speak at WordCamp Chicago, which was, here in front of, quote unquote, the home crowd, like seeing everybody that I knew out in the audience. And for me, it was awesome because it was a talk that people really engaged with. And I could tell because, I've given a lot of talks and there's always the Q&A portion at the end. And so you can tell when it's just like people asking kind of generic questions to, fill up the time. But this one in particular, you could tell that they had really listened to the talk and understood, and they were trying to understand with their questions how they could apply it to like their specific business. And so for me, that was really awesome because that's the whole point of going to stuff like WordCamp, is to pick up new tools that you can use in your business and in your, life to help make the stuff you do with WordPress easier and better. So for me, that was awesome when I started getting those kind of questions that were really specific to the talk and also really specific to their business. Because I felt like I was actually, doing what I set out to do, which is, help people and teach them.
Yeah. For me, it's the questions. Absolutely. It's also when all the cell phones start to take pictures of your screens.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's like, ooh, they like what's up there because all of a sudden they're building
they're going to need it later. Yeah. It's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you just sit up a little bit straighter kind of when that happens. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I agree with you. It's so much fun to share and to know that you're providing information that people really need. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
But if you weren't working in web, what is a career that you might like to attempt?
Well, so when I graduated college, I was convinced that I was going to be an FBI agent. But you have to work in some other job for 4 years at least before you can apply to be a special agent. And so I said, okay, like I'm pretty good at this web thing, so I'll just do that for a little bit. And then, I'll go back and do that. So I think,
how many years ago?
I don't know. It was a few. So a couple years ago is when I passed my like eligibility in terms of time. And I haven't applied yet, but maybe we'll see. I don't know if Alpha Particle gets to a place where I can feel like it's pretty good to run on its own, or maybe I'll do that. I have till I'm 35 to apply, so I've got a little bit of time, I think.
Oh, there you go. You could be an international spy.
Yeah.
You could be the hacker that's always in those things that they just 4 or 5 types on the keyboard and they say, we're in.
Yeah. Windows flying everywhere and fingers flying across the keyboard.
I cracked the code.
Yep.
I love those. What's something on your bucket list?
So I think the thing at the top of my bucket list right now is to go see the Hot Air Balloon Festival. It happens in New Mexico every year. I've seen so many pictures, and it's like a really specific thing, I know, but like I've seen so many pictures every year, and like I've seen all this stuff, and I would really just love to go out there and see it in person because I think it's cool. I'm a super kind of fan of aviation in all its forms, and so I think that's kind of the most relaxed form of flight probably. And I think there's just something really cool about it. So I really want to get out there at some point. We used to have a client out in New Mexico, and we're actually don't at the moment. So I had an excuse, and then it went away. So I'll have to find a way to get out there.
You need to find a client back out there again.
Yep.
Have you ever been to Kitty Hawk?
I have not. That's another one that should be on my list. But yeah, no, I haven't ever been there.
It's a pretty surreal experience to stay there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. Show us or tell us about one of your hidden talents.
Well, I think it'll have to be a tell. So I started taking piano lessons in 3rd grade, and then I got really annoyed with it and quit in 6th grade, but I didn't want to give it up. And so I kind of started just playing, music that I heard on the radio, or kind of just trying to figure out how songs fit together. And so I would say my hidden talent is probably being able to play piano by ear. I have this game that I play sometimes with myself, or people use Spotify and test me, but I love to just pick a song and listen to it, whether I've heard it before or not, listen to it, and with me sitting at the piano. And by the time the first chorus gets around, I try to have the whole structure and everything figured out just by ear. So sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't, but I love music, and it's something that I like doing to, relax and something other than coding that I like doing in my free time.
Well, that's funny you say that, because music really is like coding.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, for sure. Especially my first year of college, I was a music composition major. And so once you start to see like the structure of how music fits together, and this is something you guys were talking about on the first episode that I just watched this afternoon, but it was with film as opposed to music. But same thing with music. Like once you understand the structure and how music is put together, you can't listen to it the same way. Like you're always analyzing it to the point that it annoys other people, I think sometimes. But it's something that's really interesting to me. And you're right, it does have a lot of the same kind of structure and building blocks as something like code does, which is cool.
Yeah, it's actually some of the talks that are going to be, or some of the episodes that are coming up to be released in the next few weeks. Somebody else said that music and code go really well together for them,
Yeah,
and that seems to be a really good synergy. So,
for sure.
and they encourage you to get your kids into music because it actually helps stimulate the part of the brain that will help them if they want to go into coding later on.
Yeah, no, I definitely like getting used to that structure and like, okay, it has certain rules, but like you can break them sometimes if you want to, and like stuff like that. It's like, it's really cool. It's a cool crossover.
Although if you miss a note, you can continue the song, but if you're missing a semicolon,
That is true. Yeah. Well, that's where we get
um,
the white screen of death, right? There's no real white screen of death in the piano world. So
no, there's not. Unless it's just stage fright.
right,
No, it's
absolutely.
just a blank stare of death.
Yep.
Absolutely. So anything else you want to share with us today? Anything
No, I don't
exciting?
think so. I just want to say thanks for having me on. This was awesome. I mean, we talked about kind of first speaking experiences, and this is my first podcast experience as a guest, so that was really cool. And I'm excited to see where the show goes in the future. Like I said, I watched your first episode that you just released today as we record this, and I thought it was really interesting. So I look forward to seeing more of your guests' stories and experiences.
Thank you. I thank you for being one of them. One of the things that's exciting to me is every person that I talk to is another piece of the giant WordPress community puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how we all fit in together and how we're so similar and yet so different at the same time. And it's exciting to be able to help people tell their stories.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. I'm glad you saw it on Twitter. I'm glad you reached
for
out
sure.
and applied, and it's been great to have you on the show today. Can you give us some details about how people can find you on Twitter, social,
Sure. So
your
I'm not
website?
probably maybe to my detriment, but I'm not super active on social. I retweet interesting WordPress things and tech things. So my Twitter is at @Koppenhaver. In case no one wants to guess at spelling that, I think we'll have a link in the in
There will
the
be a link.
and then our site that we post interesting blog posts and things on is just alphaparticle.com. So those are probably the two best places to reach out to us. If you want to find me specifically and you don't want to message me on Twitter, I'm Keanan at alphaparticle.com is my email. So those are probably the easiest ways to reach out. And please do. I always, like you, enjoy talking to people and seeing, what they need help with or just if they want to chat. And that's always fun for me. So
Oh, fantastic. Well, I love that. So, so thank you so much for being on the show. I can't wait to be able to tweet you out and have people hear everything that you've had to share and meet you. So this is fantastic. And then they'll be looking for you at the next WordCamp, of course.
awesome. Hope to meet everybody there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Until the next episode. We'll see you later. Bye.